Roster Rescue. I know I have been gone for way too long, but we are back today talking the 2022 NFL draft rankings. And I brought a friend, Alfred from Campus to Canton. If you guys don't know what Campus to Canton is, go find them on Twitter, go find the website. These guys are the most intense college football people out there. They got the jerseys, they got everything, but seriously, Alfred, thank you for coming on the show and rep your product, man. What is Campus to Canton all about?
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot for having me. So, yeah, Campus to Canton is the league type, the format is just very extensive. Like you mentioned, you go into a draft, so your startup draft, and you have a 45 round college draft, you have a 30 to 35 round NFL draft, and you have two teams. You have a college fantasy team, full roster. You have an NFL fantasy team, full roster, and the college team does feed in to that NFL team, which is basically the NFL side is basically like your dynasty team, right? But you do have a whole college roster. So it's like Devi on steroids, if you're familiar with the Devi.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I mean it's the next frontier, I guess you could say. And there was no website. Me and some the founding members, six of us, we're like, hey, there's nobody putting anything remotely reasonably good out about this format or what to look for or how to draft it or anything like that. So we just said, let's do it.
And it's crazy. Last year, I thought I was joining a Devi, and if Dynasty PJ's out there, I
Oh,
thought I
he's
was just
he's
joining a
so
normal
yeah.
Devi, and they're like, "Oh, it's Campus to Canton." I was like, what the fuck is that?" I'm from Canton. Anybody out there, you didn't even know. I am from Canton, born and raised, the Hall of Fame city. Hall of Fame is 3 miles down the street from me. So I'm like, wait, what is this? And they're like, oh, well, you draft 45 college rounds. And I'm like, holy shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, and then you start a starting lineup every Saturday. And at first, it was a little bit, even for me, it was a little bit much. But once I got into it, man, it hit a little different to start a lineup on Saturday. It really did. It was a two quarterback setting, super flex. No, it was just a straight two quarterback and tight
Yeah.
end premium and running backs, wide receivers galore. I mean, it was a pretty big starting lineup, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Oh yeah,
and
so I mean the point totals on your college team can be like people are regularly scoring like 300 points. Not only because each individual
yeah,
player scores more, but they're such big rosters.
yeah, and it's college. It gets a little crazy. Kansas State could
Yeah,
be playing Texas Tech, and it goes 55-49, and
yeah. I mean the
Deuce
over
Vaughn
unders in
just
college
runs
are so
fucking
big.
crazy. Which he was on my team, by the way, Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah.
I think he
Oh
is a
yeah.
Campus can star. Which
Mm-hmm.
we can get into it a little bit more. It might not be the day for it, but there's between Devi when you're just picking players on NFL prospects, Campus to
Mm-hmm.
Canton has, a Deuce Vaughn is a superstar on the college side who might make it to the NFL and make a little bit of noise, but he's not, in just straight Devi, he's kind of like meant to me, like, okay, he might be a nice offensive weapon. He's everybody says Darren Sproles the same, college and everything. I don't think he can be a Darren Sproles productive wise at the NFL level, but in the C2C, man, he is a stud for Kansas State. That
Mm-hmm.
offense revolves around him. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I got him like the 15th round, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. But today we're going to gear up for the 22 NFL draft, and we're going to focus in on the fantasy players that are going to be coming into the NFL soon. So let's get it started. I've been releasing rankings here and there, and today I'm releasing my quarterback rankings, and then we'll get the running back, wide receivers, and tight ends. Now, this is the first time releasing these rankings, and before I put it out there, what do you think about this class as a whole coming into the NFL draft? If you would give it a grade, what would you give it?
Yeah, yeah. I think if I had to give the whole class together a grade, I'm with most people where it's somewhat underwhelming. Now, what actually may happen, and this has happened before, where we think we know everything, and we're like, oh, this class stinks, and then you've got like six rookie Pro Bowlers or something from this class. So uh, certainly not out of the realm of possibility that it pleasantly surprises us. But right now, I would say it is fairly weak. I mean, in most rookie drafts, I'm not too excited after like the 1-4. After that, it's like there's like 4 or 5 guys that I would be somewhat excited about, and after that, um, it's kind of like, we're just dart throwing. Whereas last year, like I was legitimately excited to take guys at the beginning of the second round in most rookie drafts.
Well, I think it's going to be a lot different because last year it was Trevor Lawrence was 1-1 in superflex drafts, no matter what. I mean, no matter what, Trevor Lawrence was going, and then right behind him was Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and even though the running backs, I mean, Najee Harris was everybody knew what he was going to be for Pittsburgh. Javante, everybody loved him. ETN before the injury, those quarterbacks were still going above them. Now this year, even though there's going to be some first round quarterbacks, I just don't know if you can solidify a quarterback going 1-1. I don't know where Isaiah Spiller, Breece Hall, some of these guys are going to go in the running back position. We all know about the wide receivers. That's definitely the best part of the college draft this year is going to be the wide receiver, at least for fantasy assets. So I can't tell you, even if one of these guys goes top 10, I don't think they're going to go 1-1. I just don't. It's going to depend who has that 1-1 spot.
You mean quarterbacks?
Yeah, quarterbacks wise.
Yeah.
I just don't know if a quarterback is going to go 1-1. Like last year, no matter what, even though the running backs were solid, it just – I didn't know if a quarterback – I don't think a quarterback's going 1-1, depending on league, depending on need and whoever the manager is, obviously, that has the 1-1. So let's get to it. I'm going to bust out – I'm going to share the screen here real quick of my quarterback rankings, and we're just going to see what you think a little bit. So I got Kenny Pickett right there at 1. Now – he graded out for me at like an 83 and 84 overall. I'm talking like a B- prospect, which is my number one quarterback. Just because he's my number one quarterback doesn't mean I'm like head over heels in love with him by any means. Sam Howell was my quarterback 1 about pre-Senior Bowl, and I didn't love how he looked. He was a little inconsistent. Went back to the 2021 tape, and he was I felt like he wasn't seeing the field as well as he was in 2020. Now, he lost a ton of NFL talent, but he was tucking the ball down and running just too much. And I don't want to see that out of my quarterbacks in college. I really don't. I want to see them sit back, maneuver in the pocket and find the open receiver. And they're my tier 1 guys, but they're not a mile ahead of the tier 2 guys. I mean, I have them as like B- grades, and then my tier 2 are like C+. So what do you think about where I have these guys tiered and ranked? And, you're allowed to be mean, man. I got thick skin.
That's good to know. Yeah, no, you've been, but just to say, like, you've been super supportive. We've been putting out some rookie report cards, and you're always like the first one to comment on those.
Fire,
I know you've
man.
enjoyed them.
They're awesome.
Yeah, so I appreciate your support there. It's been really fun to put those together. I would disagree with some of this here, but I'm very much an upside fantasy player. So I will almost always take a high risk, high reward guy over a kind of a ceiling or a floor play. I think I would put Corral or Howell at 1, and that's like a 1A, 1B to me. Both of them can run a little bit, which we know for fantasy is a big deal. So, versus a Kenny Pickett, who I just never, the only guy I made an exception for like a one-hit wonder, so to speak, was Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow went crazy in his 5th year, but he went absolutely bonkers, like set all sorts of records and things like that, which Pickett had a very nice year, but Pickett did not do what Burrow did as his 5th year senior. And when that's like the only real excellent year you have, I'm just skeptical, and we know this about receivers. We know this about running backs. Quarterbacks, we're usually a little more lenient with the whole like breakout thing. You don't have to do it when you're 18 years old or whatever, but he's the most experienced, the most mature, and went out there and was picking apart defenses. What happens when he becomes the least experienced, the least mature guy on the field? It may take him a couple years. I'm not sure his game is super fantasy friendly either. In the perfect scenario, the perfect OC and the perfect amount of weapons. Yeah, Drew Brees was a fantasy stud, but that's a perfect storm. I don't love betting on all these other factors having to come together, which I think they would need to come together for Kenny Pickett. Not saying he's not good, but like if he goes to an offense that wants to be kind of conservative, he's not going to be much for fantasy because he doesn't offer a lot of explosion to me.
Now I know Austin. I mean, I've had Austin on this podcast before.
Yeah.
Amazing dude. I knew he's a big Pitt fan, and he was lukewarm on Kenny Pickett even into like October. And in my campus Canton league, I own Kenny Pickett, and it was everything you kind of just said. I didn't think they were going to have a big offense. I got him super, super, super
Oh,
late for
yeah,
a
he was
quarterback. I mean,
borderline
last year.
undrafted. Yeah.
So, and I think it trickles down back to the offensive play calling at Pitt the year before and the year before and the year before. He did some good things. 2020, I mean, I can bring in that Boston College tape where he was amazing at the end of that game, and all the way back to when Pitt beat Miami, which was undefeated. I was at the game. I fucking cried. And he was a true freshman, and he took our undefeated season away. And it's not that he played amazing or put up a ton of stats, but they were a really mediocre, boring offense. And last year they finally opened it up and they gave him the ball. So I'm wondering if that kind of was one of the reasons why he wasn't putting up those stats earlier. Obviously, Jordan Addison had a super sophomore year,
Hmm.
became Blitnikoff winner. So we
Yeah.
already know about that. Uh,
Sensational. Yeah.
Running back, they had a couple weapons, but they just opened it up and gave him the ball. When the year before in his sophomore and freshman season, they were just kind of a run and a dink and dunk team that never really handed it off to Kenny to just be the leader that he became last year, which was amazing. But it did come out of nowhere. And he does have very small hands and a ton of fumbles. I look at that stuff because it kills quarterbacks depending where you go. If he ends up in New Orleans or in a dome, I think he can have a really, really, really good career productive wise. I don't know. He knows that Pittsburgh Stadium, so I think he'll be okay there, but not every, Buffalo, New York. I don't know if he could succeed in there with the turnovers. So, it's 1, 2, and these guys don't, I would give this class a C overall
Yeah.
grade, and that it has some guys because it goes 6 deep of where I can consider drafting, the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. So that's, not every year gets 6 quarterbacks drafted, I guess, in the first 75 to 100 picks, not every single year. So,
Right.
I'm waiting to hear it because you didn't say it, but Malik Willis at 5, I'm waiting to hear it. I'm waiting to hear somebody try to check me on it. What do we think about Mr. Malik Willis?
Yeah. That's he's a hot button. There are people obviously pushing him for quarterback one. I don't think I'd have him as quarterback one because he is. I just said I love risk reward. He's like extreme. He's probably a little bit too much risk reward, but I would probably put him at 3 just because, with that running ability, if he's got to clean up some stuff with his throwing. But I'm a firm believer that you do not have to be, Peyton Manning with the arm if you can do the things he can do on the ground. We know Lamar Jackson, uh, it leaves a little bit to be desired as a passer, and certainly did for the first 2 or 3 years of his career. He has cleaned some stuff up a bit, but look, I'm looking at all this through fantasy. Okay, I am not being a real life NFL GM right here. I'm just saying if you're going to give me 75 yards on the ground, look, Jalen Hurts. Nobody believes he's worth a damn as a real NFL quarterback, but he was a top 5. He had the most QB1 weeks of any QB this year. So for fantasy, if he's going to be drafted in the top 20 picks, first round, and a team is going to stamp him and say, this is our guy, and at least give him a shot, I'm going to draft him in the top 3 quarterbacks. I'm probably drafting him top 5 in a super flex rookie draft, almost no matter what, and would be thrilled if he fell to later than that, just because that rushing upside. And fortunately for fantasy purposes, we can just draft another quarterback next year. We're not investing millions of dollars into that pick.
So these rankings it's the opposite, Alfred. I'm not going to lie. These are my NFL draft rankings.
Okay.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions, with social media and like Twitter, it's when fantasy Twitter tries to pretend to be NFL draft Twitter
Sure.
in your feed, and you see Malik Willis, QB1. Oh my God, did you see his mile per hour throws at the Senior Bowl? And yes, he did look better than Kenny Pickett at the Senior Bowl during the bad weather day in the practice. He really did. And yes, if he gets a starting job, if he can keep that job, yes, he's going to put up a ton of fantasy points. This is not rankings for fantasy football
Okay.
because, this isn't. It's just not because You, especially for quarterback, you have to be a starter to be fantasy relevant.
Sure.
You have to be a starter. So I am not sold on him being a starter. 6'1", the 220, I like he's built, don't get me wrong, and he has a little pop. I mean, Malik Willis, the ball comes out of his hands really nice. The footwork in the pocket's terrible.
Yeah.
We didn't see him go through progressions. We seen him very inaccurate. This season,
Hmm.
he did not improve on his 2020 season, which I was looking for. And this was against some, I mean, group of five teams, and not even good group of five teams. I mean,
Yeah.
he had a
No,
chance to get.
Liberty's schedule leaves a lot to be desired. I
I mean,
mean,
and and,
yeah.
and I know Ole Miss just outclassed them in every which way, but the one thing I love about a quarterback is when he goes out there and he puts out a gutsy performance against a team that is much better than him, and he didn't do it against Ole Miss.
Hmm.
If he would have really had, they could have lost by 10, 15, 20, whatever. But if he moved his offense up and down the field, I would have said, hey, this guy's going to get it done no matter what. And I'm not seeing it. He's too much of a project. I could not see my NFL team picking him in the first round. Second round, like Jalen Hurts, I'm all for it. Let him sit behind somebody. Let him run Wildcat. Let him get out there. Let him get his feet wet. He's going to have to sit, but he's way too inaccurate. His footwork is terrible inside the pocket. And once you get him on the outside, yeah, it can be a Madden game where someone's going to end up getting
Yeah.
open, or
Yeah.
he's going to run for
Exactly.
9, 10 yards, maybe even
Yeah.
20. We see the speed; it's there. And someone checked me on this. I said, hey, he couldn't have beat Bo Nix out at Auburn, and then brought Haskins and Burrow and all this other bullshit up. So I was like, okay, I get it. That wasn't a great analogy, but still, he had to leave Auburn to become a starter. He didn't do it in the SEC. I don't take that with a grain of salt. Yes, he got better, but he didn't get better on the things he needed to in the 2021 season. And I'm thinking too many people are thinking with their fantasy head instead of their NFL draft head when they're looking at Malik Willis and thinking he's going to be a pick. Now, don't get me wrong, some NFL team could fall in love, create a game plan to succeed with his play style, and an offensive coordinator that thinks they can turn him into Lamar Jackson. And yeah, he could go very high. I just don't know how likely it is, and it's not something I can really get behind.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be drafted. I would be shocked, actually, if he was drafted top 10. You mentioned the Steelers when you were talking about Pickett, and word around the Senior Bowl was that Mike Tomlin was interested in following around Willis a whole lot. And they pick, I think, like early 20s. Now that's where I could
19.
see. Okay, so that's more where I could see him going. 15 plus, somewhere back half of the first round. He is a project, no doubt about that. I think you could
Pittsburgh was
see kind of
very
the
transparent with Najee Harris last year. Sorry to interrupt.
right,
They were
right.
very transparent, so they can. Mike
They've done
Tomlin's
that
kind of
before,
transparent.
yeah. I mean, I think the Trey Lance treatment would make a lot of sense with him. Basically, first year you get some Wildcat. Now, if I was thinking with a real NFL head, I think that's how you view Malik Willis. If someone gets all hot and heavy and wants to draft in the top 10, then he's going to probably start in the first 3 weeks of the season. And for fantasy, that's really interesting. But yeah, he's not. I don't think he's unless you just want to let him run the ball 20 times a game. I don't think he's like he's not ready to be an NFL
Yeah,
quarterback right now.
it's
Now, I will say there's a lot of different things in physiology and I think kinesiology, I think is the word. But like guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson have really improved their how they move, how they throw the ball, and fundamentals. And they've gone supersonic. I mean, we've seen Josh Allen do it. Now he is a complete anomaly, but I know that there are some things they can do with technology and how you can learn about a player's movements to clean those up and maybe make a guy more fundamentally sound. And you do that plus the athleticism. There's hope there, but it may take. I mean, Josh Allen took 3 years. So.
yeah. I mean, Josh Allen's 6'5", 240. He's barely 6'1". It's a big project. Before we move on to the running backs, Alfred, anybody else we didn't get to really talk about? Carson Strong, Corral too much. Ritter, I got Ritter as just kind of a really good backup. I mean, he's a great guy. He's going to come to the office and work his tail off. Remember Dak Prescott? He was a fourth round pick. I mean, if anybody that could be
Hmm.
his hero of a player to compare him to. I don't think it's there. I don't see a ton of arm talent. He moves around okay. He measured a lot smaller than I possibly thought. I was thinking he might have been 6'4.5", maybe
Yeah.
225, and he was 6'3", I think 209. I think he measured
Hmm.
at the Senior
Hmm.
Bowl. He's not as big as we thought. He doesn't have that live of an arm. That Cincinnati was really dominant. He had a chance to maybe prove himself and prove me wrong a little bit in that Alabama game. And I know it's Bama. Don't get me wrong, but Desmond Ritter just seems like a career backup to me. I don't see a team hooking their trailer to him and letting him run off with the starting job. But he there's a good chance he probably goes day two and gets behind a quarterback with a chance to maybe improve. What do you think about Desmond Ritter or anybody else on this list before I move on?
Yeah, I agree with you on Ritter. I think you said it really well. It's kind of what I was more excited about him, honestly, before this past season. He was the offense up until this year, where he honestly took kind of a back seat. He ran less, he handed off more. The guy was a fifth year senior. He was the face of that team, and they decided the better option was to rely on their defense and run the ball. And that does not make me really excited about a next level leap. I mean, I just would want to see a quarterback who's going to light it up in the NFL, just like be the guy that everyone's like, oh, yeah, I mean, put it in Desmond Ritter's hands. And they kind of didn't do that this year. It's really weird. But then mechanically, I agree. His throwing motion is a little bit funky. He does not seem to really fire the ball, which I think in the NFL, we may have some issues getting to the outside hash mark, things like that's what I look at. Cross field, where you got that 10-yard out, but you got to go all the way across the field, hash mark to sideline, and you got to throw those balls really hard. And I'm not sure I see that from him. So I'm not thrilled with Desmond Ritter. I agree. I think he might be a backup now. A guy I really like. It's more, and I've said this on Twitter. Like I think I want him to be better than I think he'll be. Is Ellaby. I really
How'd
like
I
what
know
he
it?
did. Yeah, I really like what he did. Obviously, 2020 lit the world up, but it's the MAC. You really have to take that with a grain of salt. What's going on in the MACtion on Tuesday nights? Um, but I do think he has a pretty live arm, and I think he's more athletic than he showed this year. I think he's got a little bit of scoot to him. He can use his legs, and he's really accurate. I don't think he's going to start immediately, but like if there was one guy, like you mentioned, Dak Prescott, if there was a guy who was going to go round three or round four or round five, and 2 years from now we look back and go, oh man, he's like kind of good. I would maybe say it'd be Ellaby.
Good shit, man. That's from a campus to camp guy that's been following him probably a lot more deeper than your normal dynasty manager because Ellaby, he's not on too many guys' radars. It took him a while to get on mine, but
Mm-hmm.
definitely has a little bit of juice, and he could be a late round guy that you get behind a veteran and you get him in your system and he can move around a little bit and he's got a little
Mm-hmm.
juice in that arm. I mean, he really
I
does.
mean,
So I can
if
like
you
it.
want to get if you want to get real crazy, uh, I could see like a Russell Wilson situation. He got drafted in the
Ooh.
third round, went to a team who traded for Hassel, or was it Hasselbeck or Flynn?
Oh,
No,
what's his
Matt
name?
Flynn back
Matt
in the
Flynn.
day.
Jesus
Traded for
Christ.
Matt
Matt
Flynn,
Flynn.
paid a ton of money for Matt Flynn, and then Russell Wilson straight up beat him out in camp. And obviously, since then, the rest is history. I'm not saying he is that. I'm just saying like the game is similar, their body is a little similar. It wouldn't shock me. I'm definitely going to have a lot of Caleb Ellaby, especially in Superflex. I think you're going to be able to get him like late second round, third round. I'll just scoop him up every single time.
So I didn't mean to cut you off there. I'm gonna bring up the uh,
The running backs, yes.
running backs. I mean, it started. fantasy football starts with the running backs, even for
Yeah.
me in super flex drafts, and I'm cutting off my 29 and 30. That's a secret. If you want to know my 29 and 30th ranked running back, you go ahead and hit my DMs. I will talk about it all fucking day. So, anyway, um, what are we thinking? I'm a big fan of the big three. I think Kyron Williams deserves to be in that tier. And like I said, this is NFL draft rankings. This is how I would draft these players on my NFL team. And yes, they're different schemes, they're different players, different sizes. But the thing about them is they all do something really well, all a little different. There's not one guy that just checks every single box of the whole entire class. Isaiah Spiller, I mean, his contact balance is amazing. He doesn't have the 4.4 speed, but he's a guy that's just going to churn out yards. And obviously, Kenneth Walker jumped on the scene for me. I was not huge on him at Wake Forest. He was kind of an unknown, even for me. Came into the league, or not the league, excuse me, into the Big Ten, Michigan State. I mean, that first game against Northwestern, what did he go for like 300?
Yeah.
I'm like, holy shit, who's this guy? I mean, a sneaky burst, and he always seems to find that hole, a little bit of a cutback runner. And, I think he might run one of the better 40s of this class. And Brees Hall is everybody's, especially at campus at Canton, like the guy that was
Oh
putting up
yeah.
stats 2019, 2020, 2021 RB1 stats. I think Kyron is in the same tier as those guys because of what he can do on third downs. He can pass protect. He can get out on a linebacker, make you miss, get him in the open field, and he is sneaky tough to take down. I can bring
Hmm.
up dozens of runs where how did he not go down on that? How did he run through a defensive lineman or this linebacker? How did he get hit like that and keep going and spring it for another 10 or 20 yards? Kyron Williams is the real deal, and he deserves to be up with the top three. Alfred, am I crazy here, or what do you think about my top tier?
No, I think your top tier is pretty much spot on. I don't know if I'd put Kyron in top tier. He would be my four, but I just don't know if I'd include him in the same lump there. But um, I actually would have the running backs flip flop. The top three would be kind of flipped for me. I think that I personally am a Brees Hall guy. Um, you know,
Does he have
none of
enough
these guys.
juice? Does he have
I
enough
think he
juice in those
does. I
legs?
mean,
Is he a good enough athlete? Now he has super soft hands. He's like big bear hands. I mean,
yes,
he catches the ball
yes.
really well. But is he going to get out on a linebacker and really get open, or is he just going to be a dump off guy? Now, I mean, he's really hard to take down. He's 227 pounds. He does everything really nice, really
Yeah.
nice. I just don't know if he does anything well enough to be a NFL star.
I mean, I guess that's actually. See, I think he's got a little more juice than Isaiah Spiller. I mean, I think Spiller's a little sluggish, some burst, but like Spiller to me is the guy I would ask the same question actually, and maybe both of them in the end are not special talents. Spiller just seems to be like just a step more sluggish than Brees. I love Brees Hall's vision. Like you said, both these guys are pretty good receivers. They both had very nice market shares almost their entire careers in college. Um, I just think Brees Hall's got a little more juice. Actually, it'll be interesting to see 40 time. Now, 40 time is for me is a it's a threshold thing. Basically, if you're under 4.6, I'm pretty fine with it. Running back, I care more than a receiver. I almost don't care at all about receivers, but for running backs, if they're both at 4.55, 4.50, four four
They
nine,
probably
something
both
like that,
they'll
and
probably
no one
both be in
goes
the four
like
fives.
really low, I'm not that worried about it. Now we'll see about three cone and stuff. Maybe that'll show a little burst and change of direction. I think Brees Hall's got a little more of that change of direction at the line of scrimmage and is a little more elusive. I think Kenneth Walker would be three for me just because he's not as complete as the other guys. He doesn't have the receiving prowess, at least in college. I mean, maybe in the NFL he'll show us something new. Up to this point, I haven't seen it. And then he's smaller than I thought. I think at the Senior Bowl, was he at the Senior Bowl? No, he's a junior. So I think he's like closer to under 210, which I thought he was more at 220 or so. So Spiller and Hall to me at 220, 225 is what I want to see.
Actually, at the combine, one of the most important things at the combine for me is getting an accurate measurement on these guys,
Yeah, weight
especially
and
running
height.
back.
Yeah. Yep.
especially running backs. I
Yep.
want to know what you weigh. And Kenneth Walker, he's listed at 210. Let's see what he lists at, and then it kind of depicts what they run. Are you bigger than what I thought you were going to be, but you run slower than I think you should? I think
Hmm.
that might be an issue of you getting too big for what you need to be.
Yeah.
I, I like him. He might be 205, 210. I think he's going to be big enough. He's not going to be one of those guys that's 195. I think he's going to be big
No,
enough.
I
But
don't think that. But like to me, if you're under 210 and you're not catching a lot of passes, I just think that's like a tweener type dude in the NFL. Like you either need to be a Hulk smash at 220 plus, or you're lighter and you catch passes, or obviously the ideal is you're 220 and catch passes, which the
I
top two
think
guys I
Kenneth,
think
I
can.
think he's going to be okay catching the ball. Michigan State. I mean, you thought he would catch the ball a little bit more. It doesn't mean he can't do it. We've seen. I mean, I'm not going to bring up 100 different instances, but we've seen a ton of instances where running
Okay.
backs had very little production in the pass game,
Oh
but
yeah,
came into the
JT. I mean
NFL. Yeah,
JT.
I mean, it's more or less like what type of running back catching the ball are you? Are you a guy that's just a dump off guy like JT basically was? He wasn't out there running in the slot too much, beating guys or beating corners or safeties or anything. It's kind of dump offs, and then he's so athletically gifted that he makes a big play because he's so big and fast.
Right.
But Kyron can get out there and run legitimate routes very quickly.
Oh yeah.
What do you think about my tier two? Because this is where it gets dicey, man. When you go
Very
between,
dicey.
running back five, I'm pretty set on Rashad White, and he's a really good. He has a lot of separation from, I guess, 6, 7, 8, 9, even though they're in the same tier. But if you go from 6 to, you can almost go down to 18, 19, 20, and there's not much difference in my grade.
Yeah.
It's kind of your
It gets
system, your scheme,
yeah.
what you need. If you have a power back already, you're going to be looking at Tyler Batty or Jaron Ely or some of these guys, McCormick, that are smaller, that can be the scat guys, or you could have a scat guy and you need a power guy. And
Mhm.
you then maybe Brian Robinson goes up higher on your list, or Zonovan Knight's a guy that has a lot of juice that we didn't see the production that I wanted because he shared the backfield at North Carolina State, but we've seen. I mean, he can return kicks. I think he can be very dynamic in the pass game. He has a really nice frame. It's kind
Yep.
of some untapped potential. What do you think about my tier two and tier three? Because they're very close.
Yeah, almost interchangeable. I like what you said about basically you're picking and choosing skill sets and what may fit for your offense. If you're a GM or you're selecting these guys. You know, I I am tempted to have Rashad White where you have him. Honestly, he came in a little
I think
bigger than
he
we
is,
thought.
man. I think the top five to me, it's hard to get me. It's hard for anybody to tell me that's not the top five. I have a
The only
strong
counterpoint
disagreement.
I would have is I have not heard many things in the way of mock drafts or kind of NFL people. Now I'm not talking about fantasy people. I'm talking about like people who do mock drafts because they talk to teams and they have sources. Nobody seems to be talking about White even after his Senior Bowl, and so usually these guys start getting buzz. I'm sure some of the receivers we'll talk about are getting all this buzz, starting to get mocked in third round. Not seeing that for White yet, and that just makes me wonder: is NFL just down on him for whatever reason, for something that we may not be able to know at the moment? And that makes me hesitant. But from what I see on film and from what I see on his stat sheet, box score metrics, I think he should be there now. If he doesn't get drafted on day two, it's going to be a problem. Um,
I don't
I
know.
like Kevin Harris.
We've seen day three guys get production. I mean, Michael Carter last year. I mean, he had the injury concern, like where he was out, but he was very productive last year as a day three guy. Elijah Mitchell. I mean, it
Yeah,
can happen, and I think he will be a day two guy.
yeah.
His size, he can do it in the pass game, and I mean, his
Great
lateral
pass receiver.
quickness.
Great receiver.
I mean, his
Yeah.
lateral quickness is. I mean, he's the twitchiest running back in this class. He has the most twitch. Nobody's going to tell me different in this class. Maybe Beatty, but he has the size that he doesn't have. And going down, Jerome Ford is a
I'm
guy
out.
that
I'm out on Ford. I
he's
don't
a
even I
scheme
won't take him
selective
at all.
guy.
Yeah.
He's got to be in the right scheme. A kind of a
The
downhill.
dude, let's just look. I do a lot of I do base a lot of things on analytics. I do watch film too, but like he shared time with Jared Dokes. Like, let's just let that sink in for a minute. He's not a special
Hey,
talent.
I took Dokes in my rookie draft, man. Don't I want to hear shit about that?
I have some Dokes too.
I thought he was going
I
to take
thought he
that
would.
job in Miami, man. Come
I
on.
thought he'd get a
I
shot. The guy didn't even take a snap all season. Like, he's obviously not
know.
very good. So,
I know.
um,
I know.
I
Jared,
do like
let's
Kevin
not
Harris, though. I think Kevin Harris is a very interesting player.
that
220
2020 tape.
plus, yes, and he was excellent in 2020. Um, like 1,500 yards or something against all SEC opponents. They did not have any cupcakes. Shared this year, their offense was a complete disaster. Starting like a graduate student who was like was an off-field analyst for some team or
Yeah.
something, then came to play QB. Complete nightmare on offense this year, but he still was okay. He's like he's probably not special, but I think he's good, and I think he's the type of guy you stash on your dynasty team. A couple injuries happen, and you get some weeks out of him where he goes 20 carries, 87 yards, and scores 2 touchdowns or
Alfred, I
something
know
like
you
that. Like,
watch almost every game, man. And if you didn't watch it live, you watched the full. Did you watch the bowl game against North Carolina? They did not want to touch him. They did
yeah,
not want
dude,
to come up
he's
and
a
hit that guy. He's
beast.
a fucking bulldozer. He really is.
Yes.
I mean, he is the most physically intimidating running back in this class. And there's a couple other big boys. And he did it in 2020. He led the
Yeah.
SEC in rushing with a terrible offense. I mean, that was a
I mean,
terrible
just
offense.
terrible.
And they knew he was getting the ball, and he was a grinder. And he's like
But
I
he's
said, I
not.
mean,
I
and
think there's a little bit of a misconception. Like, I don't think he's that much of a grinder, honestly. Like, I think he's big, and I don't think he's that fast, but I don't think he's just a grinder. Like, he's got some wiggle, he's got some burst, and he can catch the ball too. He's not a zero in the passing game. I actually really like him, and you're not going to have to pay anything in the rookie drafts. Like, even you sitting here at what you got him at 7. You're probably going to be the high guy if you keep him at 7. Like, he's going to go real late, and you can just scoop him up late.
he's kind of
I would
my guy,
circle that
but
name.
I think he's the guy that maybe the one there's a couple teams that are going to need a power back that are going to look at him a little bit closer than maybe some other teams that are
Dude,
okay
the
with it
Chargers have been trying to find a power back for like 4 years, and they keep drafting these awful
every single year.
slugs. They
Oh,
just keep
Josh
drafting these
Kelly.
horrible slugs,
Oh,
dude. Josh
anybody
Kelly.
watching anybody watching knows my Josh Kelly hype from 2020, and oh god damn it, I lost so many
But
trades
he would
because of
be a
Josh
nice
Kelly.
fit for there. And a guy you mentioned before, number 15 on your list, Tyler Beatty, as an Eckler understudy. And then if Eckler goes down, I think he fits real nice in that offense. That's the kind of
That's
guy he might be.
I mean, and he's got some juice too, man. I picked
Yeah.
him up actually in my Devi as a waiver wire guy, and I was kind of hoping like he wasn't C2C, so I was just kind of hoping, let's see what I think he's going to have a little bit of draft capital, but I really highly doubt he goes before pick 75 in the third round or something like that. Anybody, I'm just completely off on this list. Anybody that is just ridiculously too low, too
Let's
high,
see.
go through
I
my tier
think
3 and 4.
well, Ford's too high for me. I don't see him getting the draft capital, and he's not complete enough to think he's going to get 3 down back. So I'd bump him down. I'd bump Keontae Ingram is really interesting, and if he stays in this range, I'm going to have a lot of him because he's going to be like a 4th round rookie pick. And Noah Hills, who writes for Breakout Finder, real smart guy, has said his profile at least looks a lot like Kamara. Now, that doesn't mean he plays exactly like Kamara, but he's got the size of Kamara. He's got the dual threat ability. He can catch passes. He was I think he's 210 at the Senior Bowl. He was listed at like 220 at Texas and USC. If he comes in closer to 220 at the combine and tests decent, he could be very interesting just because he may not even get day 2 capital. But like you said, he could be a day 3 gem or a guy that waits his turn.
He's a
But a
natural
couple
runner.
injuries,
He does
yeah.
things really well, and he has nice size. And for his size, his agility, He might be the second most twitch in this draft class behind Rashad White for me because he makes some really good linebackers and safeties look pretty bad, and he did it last year. He did it at Texas a
Yeah.
lot. If it wasn't
Yeah.
for Robinson,
He has his highlight reel is great. His whole body of work, it leaves some to be desired. Like, he's never commanded a backfield. He's never just been a workhorse. Although at the end of the year this year for USC, he kind of ended up being a workhorse, I think, due to some injuries and stuff, and had a couple games with like 25 touches. But he's never had a whole season, where he's like a 300 touch guy, which you like to see to project that in the
are
NFL. But
are you on the Damian Pierce hype train? Because I've heard a
I'm a Florida
lot of it.
Gator. I went to Florida. Okay, so I watch, like you say, I watch every game. I literally watch every Florida game every single week, and I'm pretty much out on Dameon Pierce. I mean, at running back 16, I don't have a problem with it.
Oh man,
Whatever.
he can
That's
block
so
though.
deep.
Did you see him blocking at the Senior Bowl? Did you see him
Yeah,
blocking?
in your points per
Oh,
pass block league, he's gonna be a stud.
oh my
But
God.
like the dude, okay, there's scouting the tape and ignoring analytics, and that's okay. But at some point, you got to be like, if you love Dameon Pierce, someone explain to me how he didn't get more than 106 carries in any season. You played 12 games in college. That's not even 10 carries a game, and the guy was not injured. That does not make any sense. Now, Dan Mullen was a disaster, but like,
Was he though? Actually, real quick, was Dan Mullen that bad? You were
no, not
just
as a play
was it the
caller. No,
was
as a
it the
recruiter
Sugar
and
Bowl?
stuff.
I
As a
mean, I don't know if
recruiter and
there's some
stuff.
stuff behind the scene, but Dan Mullen to me is a top 15 head coach in college football.
He's a
And
great
I
offensive
think you
scheme or
took a
play
downgrade.
caller.
I think you took a downgrade, and it's probably for another day. But
Yeah,
I,
that would be. We could spend a lot more time on that, but
I mean,
but
I think
anyway,
Dan Mullen is one of the best that really does it in college football. And you know, I mean, even going back to Mississippi State, he did he ever really feature a running back for humongous stats? I mean, I'm trying to think. I can't really
well,
think of it.
uh, I think he does rotate guys, but like if Dameon Pierce is so good, he should have had more than like 8 carries a game. I mean, if he's NFL good, it doesn't matter. You give your guy. You're trying to win games. I mean, I just don't believe it. I don't believe that he's some special guy. I think he's kind of slow. I think he's got maybe a tiny bit of burst. He blocks, sure, that's great. I don't think he's going to be a day 3 pick, and I just don't really have that much interest in Dameon Pierce. Maybe I'm just
So
a bitter Gator fan. I don't know.
yeah, I know. So I know you're on a time restriction. So I think we might have to continue the rest of my rankings here because wide receiver and tight
Yeah,
end.
let's hit the receivers and tight end. We can jump in there and do them still.
Okay, let's jump in it real quick because the running backs, it's where it starts for fantasy for me.
For
And
sure.
yes,
Can't ignore the
at
running
Roster
backs.
Rescue, it's about fantasy football, but to me, it's the NFL draft until these guys get drafted. So let me bring up my wide receiver list, and it's a deep one, man. And it's okay. Actually, I take that back a little bit. I take that back a little bit. It is very top heavy, and it's going to go very deep the first 2 days. I think it kind of drops completely off a cliff after about the 16, 17, 18. I kind of like, but last year, it went really deep to where I like 25, 30 type guys. But the top 2 tiers for me are just going to be amazing prospects in the NFL and fantasy assets. And to me, Traylon Burks and Garrett Wilson are just a tier ahead of everybody else because they're so well. First off, Garrett Wilson is just so. I mean, he's so good at everything.
Yeah,
To me, he
absolutely.
has the
100%.
size. He has the size. He has really good speed. Maybe not great speed. He's an excellent route runner. He gets contested balls. He has good hands. He can do it after the catch. I mean, there's nothing you can really say bad about Garrett Wilson. Traylon Burks he's just like a firecracker waiting to pop because he's that special athletically, very raw route running, very raw getting off the line. But you can do so many different things with him. and try to form him into a number one wide receiver. I mean, his size can be special. He's a
Oh yeah.
combination of an AJ Brown, Josh Gordon, DK Metcalf. I mean, he's going to be the
Mm-hmm.
combine wow guy. He's going to take his fucking
Mm-hmm.
shirt off, and it's going to look like DK. And he's probably going to weigh about 225, and he's going to run under a 4.5, probably a mid 4.4, maybe even lower. We've seen this guy do it. And then after that, you get to my tier two, where these guys could easily be tier one guys in another class. I started the season with George Pickens, even after the injury, as my wide receiver one. I faded a little bit because we didn't get to see it. And it wasn't because of that. It's just because Treylon had an excellent season. Garrett Wilson proved everything that I liked about him. And then Drake London, Jameson Williams emerged. David Bell, another guy that does everything so well. Maybe not from a combine. He's not going to wow anybody with his shirt off. He can do everything so well. Dotson has been one of my favorites. I thought he was the most underrated player coming into the 2021 season. I believe he should have went to the draft last season. How do you think How do you think I have this first two tiers of wide receivers ranked, and what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think we're actually vibing pretty well here on the receivers.
Ooh,
I go back and forth with one and two, but I agree they're in a tier of their own. So that's definitely right. I
good.
think ultimately I would say Treylon Burks is the one because, like you mentioned, the upside is just worth taking a swing on with a very high pick, both in the NFL and your fantasy drafts. But yeah, he could be like a supersonic Debo Samuel if he goes to a team that uses him in the right way. You get some running, you get some jet sweeps, you get some kind of unconventional usage, and then also obviously he's a AJ Brown kind of with the ball in his hands. He just you could dream. You could dream anything with him, and will he hit it? I don't know, but you could absolutely. The upside is tremendous. And he returns punts at 225. Like he might get some punt returns. Like he's just so dynamic. I love Garrett Wilson for every reason that you said. I do think he's the most technically sound receiver in the class. He does everything very, very well. I could see him being like CD Lamb-ish. I think I saw someone on Twitter say he's kind of like a CD Lamb, kind of wiry, really strong, excellent body control, excellent route runner. Not an overwhelming physical specimen the way Treylon Burks is, but gets the job done. And I think we'd be talking about CeeDee Lamb differently if he didn't go to a team with Gallup and Amari Cooper already in the fold. Like I'd love to see Garrett Wilson go to a team that doesn't have a primary receiver, and I think he would fill that spot. And I think CeeDee Lamb still will eventually. Then you got tier two, and I have really been thinking about George Pickens. I think because there's no one behind him that I'm super excited about, I would be willing to put him at 3. Because, again, upside, he is the guy who's got upside to compete, in my opinion, with a Burks or a Wilson. If you think about, like, if it comes together, the injury works, the team is good. And I'll say this. When he got injured, I was talking, I think, to John Hagler about it. And I was like, he played college ball. And I was like, dude, what is it like to rehab from that? Like, so much psychology goes into that, working hard, getting back on the field. And I was a little worried because there were some rumors that Pickens was like a little bit of a head case, kind of really hot head, could kind of do some things on the sideline, throw the ball down, do some things like that. But he came back within the same calendar year from an ACL. Like that shows me a lot. That shows me a lot of dedication at age 20 to do that, to work hard, get back on the field, and have big catches and big moments towards the end of the season, and then play in the playoff. Like that actually answered some questions for me. I mean, whether it's not necessarily like it's a little bit anecdotal, a little bit, arbitrary maybe, but like I think the fact that he came back from this injury and was playing in premium spots for Georgia answers some questions about dedication and the ability to work really hard, which he's going to need at the next level. But I think 3 is a pretty decent spot for him. Drake London, not as excited about. I think he's like David Bell-ish to me. So I think they're going to be similar. Um, and then Jameson Williams, obviously that lights out speed, but I do think he's a little bit limited, at least right now.
I
But yeah,
think
I'd kind
Drake
of agree
London.
with you.
I think Drake London. He's one of those guys that's not going to be quarterback proof because he's not going to be a guy that creates an insane amount of separation.
I'm with
He's
you
a
there.
guy that's going to have to be he's going to have to be with a veteran quarterback who knows how to throw a back fade
Mm-hmm.
and throw. It's going to be ball placement, and he's going to have to be into the right scheme. But I mean, he can be a special guy. And going back to the 2020 season, USC was rolling him out in the slot a lot.
Yeah,
So he has
he's
a
versatile.
very
Yeah.
he's got a versatile route tree. I think he can emerge into the NFL pretty easily, but with the right team, the right quarterback, for him to be, I guess, a star, be the type of player that you want on your fantasy starting lineup every single week. I love him as a prospect, but there's scenarios where he might not be a fantasy star.
Yeah.
Same with Jameson Williams. I mean, he's going to be. Hey, I said it like 7 months ago. I don't care what anybody says. He is a perfect Mike Wallace comp. Mike Wallace from 10,
Yeah.
12 years ago with
Blazing
Pittsburgh,
speed. Yep.
decent speed or decent size with amazing speed, who is not a bad route runner, but not a great route runner. He's never going to be a great route runner. He's never going to be a great contested catch guy, but he's the opposite of a Drake London where he's going to create a massive amount of separation.
Yeah.
Let's hope. I mean, unfortunately, so many knee injuries in this class, man. It's really
Mm-hmm.
sad. I mean, these ACLs, we're not going to see Mechie at the combine. Jameson Williams. I'm not sure if Pickens ready to go. Did you hear that?
Seems that way. I mean, he was playing
Yeah,
limited
I don't.
snaps, but
If
like he
you're
was
going to
obviously
play,
cleared
then
for
you have
full
to be at the combine,
contact.
right? Why wouldn't
Yeah,
you be at the
he was
combine?
cleared for full contact, obviously. So
So that's kind of that makes me a little scary, but
one word
and I
of caution for Drake London, he put up a ton of raw stats because of the air raid that they ran out there. But on a yards per team pass attempt, which is a metric that I really like for projecting forward, he actually like never really even hit your average target on yards receiving yards per pass attempt. So I'm a little worried that he got a ton of volume, which is a good thing, but wasn't super efficient. And that's a little concerning to me because of the things that you've said as well. Not a lot of separation. Potential. I mean, I don't know if he's a great yak guy. So
he's
I'm
not.
a little I'm a
He's not.
little worried
I've
that
heard
he's
someone. I've heard someone.
yeah.
I can't. I'm not going to say any names or whatever. I don't even really care. But he's not going to be a great yak guy. He's just not.
Right.
He's not going to
And
be
as
a
a
great
I mean,
separator, and he
when we're
doesn't
trying to
have to be.
project,
He's
no, but when
6'5",
we're trying to
225
project
pounds.
forward, you're going to have to be a major volume guy. So is he going to get 10, 12 targets a game? I don't know. That's probably, like you said, quarterback and scheme dependent. I'm not thrilled with him. I'd probably take a shot on Williams or maybe David Bell, who's been better for his entire career, in my opinion, than London.
Yeah.
And then maybe slide London down to like 6. I mean, but we're talking splitting hairs. The only other thing that I'd say here, I'd probably have Robinson in tier 2, but at the back. I think
Great.
he's super dynamic. He's going to be small. Didn't we talk about this on Twitter the other day?
We
Worried about his
did. I mean,
size?
how big is he? We've
Right.
seen him
I
next
mean, I
to
don't know.
Rondell Moore, and they look like the same height. Rondell was 5'7"
Yeah, you said you were scared
exactly.
of that. We'll see.
So
We'll
even
see
if
in a
he's
month or
five foot
whatever, right?
eight, even if he's 5'8", maybe if he's, I don't think he's 5'9". I really don't, guys. And he is dynamic. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. He
Yeah, he
he
is.
is he's electric. Can he win on the outside? My top 9 wide receivers, my top 2 tiers, I know those guys can win on the outside along within the slot. They can do multiple different things. Don't get me wrong. And when Robinson can do a ton of different things, is he ever going to be able to win on the outside?
That's
I don't see it.
fair.
I
We'll
don't see it.
see.
So he's going to fall into a tier 3, which he could still be very reliable in fantasy. Like I said, this is just how I would draft these guys on my NFL roster.
Yeah.
And I just don't see him being able to win on the outside. I mean, he could be electric in the slot, but he's still he's going to be 5'8", 175, 180 guys. And he's not going to be a 4-2 guy. he's really nice route runner. That doesn't mean he's a really nice route runner from the slot. I don't see him lining up against a Jalen Ramsey type on the
No, and he
outside
may not.
ever
I mean, he
winning.
could be a high volume. He could be a high volume slot guy, and get some running looks and some punt returns. The other thing is, I'd probably have Tolbert down, although he's getting some legitimate NFL buzz. He's probably going to be a day two pick. I'd probably slide Tolbert down behind Moore, Dobes, and Shakir personally. But otherwise, I pretty much agree with that tier as well. So I mean, I think we're
Yeah,
pretty close on the. I mean, with some splitting hairs differences, but I think we're pretty close on these receivers.
yeah. This tier three doesn't get me. I mean, super super excited. You're going to see some of these guys probably go in the third round. Maybe a couple of them fall to the fourth round, depending on what really happens. Watson really showed out. He's the player that has a lot of buzz
Lot of
because of
buzz.
his
Yep.
size, and he has a lot of speed. And he had an amazing Senior Bowl. So he's a guy pre-Senior Bowl. I think I had him in tier four. I bumped him up to high tier three because of he checks a lot of boxes. I mean, this is what I'm looking at. He's going to have the speed. He's going to have the size. He's going to be able to win on the outside. He seems like he has a lot of good tape of him running after the catch. I mean, really good tape. I'm not 100% sold he's going to be a very good route runner. If he's just a mediocre route runner with a decent release, I think he can be a really nice NFL player just because of his size. So he's a
Yeah.
guy I've bumped up, and
And I do think
Justin Ross
I think
is.
he bought himself some day two capital. I mean, I think
Oh hell
he's
yeah!
going to be a third round pick now. So
I mean, I want to bring up Justin Ross real quick, and before we hit tier four, and this is a guy after 2019 I had pegged as a top 5 overall prospect in this class. Like, this guy is going to be the first wide receiver taken. He's going to be. I called him the next Julio Jones. After that
mm.
game against Alabama,
Oh,
when
it
they
was
torched
impressive.
Alabama, I called him the next Julio Jones, and there was an injury, and then we go back into the 2021 season where DJU was so fucking god awful, and their offense was just so vanilla and bland and just the. And he had a lot of situations where he might have made a big play, but he didn't. It's just very lazy routes. And he has the contested catch because he has that size. He really does. But was he lame dicking it a little bit because of his injury, because of the neck? I don't know, maybe. But there's some scenarios where I thought he could try to bring the ball down and he just did not. So I question his hands. I question his go get it with wide receivers. And we've seen smaller guys become these players like a Steve Smith that just he wanted it more. I mean, he
hmm
just did. And I don't know. Did something change after that injury? What are we thinking about Justin Ross in your eyes?
Yeah, I think you laid it out pretty well. He's a. I'll put it this way: he's a guy that I think I'll be happy to take at that point in a rookie draft because his freshman season was so awesome as a true freshman to come in, get like 25% of the market share. His yards per team attempt, which I mentioned earlier, was excellent as a true freshman, well over the average of guys who go on to be relevant in the NFL. Year two was a bit of a step back. Year three was an injury, and then year four was janky. You've got DJU out there doing whatever he's doing, and maybe a little dust, a little rust from the injury. I think at that point in the draft, if he falls to where you're looking at right here in this tier, and I'm looking at my draft queue, and I've got Justin Ross or Tolbert Moore, Dube, Shakir, and then the rest of those guys, I'm happy to take Ross because of his pedigree, what he did as a freshman. Um, I mean, I think he could be T. Higgins ish if everything works out right. He's got that length. He's got that similar game to me. Huge catch radius. I think he's a good player, and we'll see. But at that point, you're not going to have to spend a premium pick on him, and I think he's a nice guy to have. The other thing, if you're thinking, I mean, just from fancy angle too, because of that pedigree, he comes out and does anything at all. I mean, all of a sudden everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, he's back," and then his value is gonna go crazy high. So it's a nice lotto ticket that makes a lot of sense.
I like that term. He might he has higher upside than the guys you just mentioned below him, and that's why I have him ranked 12th. So,
Correct. Yeah.
I have him pegged for the late second, early third round. I mean, he has the capabilities. I just don't know if he's ever going to be the player that we ever thought he was going to be, or anywhere close. And maybe I'm just a
Sure.
little turned off because I
Well,
don't
the
know if,
injury. I mean, we just don't know exactly. I mean, it was like a spinal cord something. They thought he'd never play again, and
and it's where,
so
like, look, dude, I understand it. Like, if he was sitting here, I'm like, hey, I have compassion, I really do. But going forward in my head, I just don't know, as in these NFL terms, what that's going to do at the next level where it's way more physical. You have guys that are way bigger, quicker,
sure. Yeah.
scheming. I mean, I just don't know.
I think it's fair. I think it's fair, but the beauty of it is you're going to get to draft him at a low risk proposition. So I think he's in a great
Awesome,
spot
man.
actually.
Yeah, I mean, at the right spot. I mean, yeah, throw your dart. It's got some capabilities of emerging and to be a superstar that he could have been. Hey, anybody in the tier four that you're liking? Maybe I should have a little bit higher. That maybe is a sleeper. Anybody there you like?
There's a couple here. I think Phillips or Pimpleton are interesting to me. Phillips, he was actually really good, really young at UCLA. He ended up spending 4 years there, but he's got some legit speed. He returned punts, I think, as a freshman or sophomore, which I always like to see, because especially for the later picks, because if you return punts, even if you can't get on the field as the wide receiver three, you can maybe earn your job as a punt returner. And if you're on the field, you can make plays, you can earn more snaps, et cetera, et cetera, et
You
cetera.
have a roster
So
spot. I mean, this
you
is
have a
where you're
right,
looking.
exact, very
Who's going to
much
make a
that.
team? Who's going to make a team?
Absolutely, absolutely. You get drafted on day 3, but you can return punts. Absolutely right. You have much more likely chance to get a roster spot. And I think Phillips and Pimpleton both. Pimpleton's one I really kind of like. I mean, he's an exceptional special teams player. Exceptional special teams, and I think that's going to give him on a roster. And I think he's got juice. I think he really does. So Pimpleton going to be way, way down your list, but circle that name because I think, especially in your deep dynasty leagues, like you're going to be happy you have him on your taxi squad.
He's got some juice, man. And
He
I've been seeing
does.
Calvin Austin up in. I think I think Todd McShay had him as wide receiver 10 ahead of David Bell, and I thought that's just fucking ridiculous. But Calvin Austin, I mean, he's really nice, man, but he's another guy. Is he ever going to be able to actually win on the outside at five
No,
seven
not at
one
that
seventy?
size. No, no, no.
No, you're never
Guess
going to be able to
what?
win on the outside. So you're in my tier four because you're going to be just a slot guy. You're not, I mean, like, all right, Tyler Lockett is what, about 5'10?
Yeah.
He can win on the outside, but he also has Russell Wilson running around, letting him, spread out and get deep. I just don't. I mean, he's very dynamic, but at 5'7", 175, I can't get too excited in the top 3 rounds. So basically, these tier four guys is just, Polk is a guy, maybe someone likes him and drafts him in the 3rd round. Maybe even Rambo, who came to Miami, had a nice season. But all these guys just seem like day 3 guys that are just going to get into a team system and then maybe can emerge, as a backup, and then an injury can kind of force feed them the ball a little bit, and then you have something. Austin's nice and everything, but I mean, what is he really going to do in the NFL other than be another guy in your receiving core?
Yeah. No, I agree
Him
with
and
that.
Pimpleton are like, you could throw either
Those
one of
guys
them
are
out
more
there. They're the same
dynamic.
price.
Like just to give, I mean, it kind of probably doesn't mean anything, but like Pimpleton in his career, I just pulled it up. He was 7 of 12 for 181 yards and a touchdown passing. Like he just does shit on the football field that you want to see. Like they gave him the ball, told him throw a ball, punt return, 2 touchdowns as a senior, 2 punt return touchdowns as a senior, over 500 yards punt return in his career. Obviously, all the receptions. He got rushing. He also got a ton of rushing. 32 carries in his final 2 seasons and scored 5 touchdowns on the ground. Like he's just, if you're going to take a deep dart throw like that, you want a guy who, like, whatever team he's on, they're like, we have to run everything through Pimpleton. Like that's what you want. That's the kind of guy at the next level who will get some looks because he's so dynamic. That's what that tells me. So, and you're paying nothing. I mean, he may go undrafted, like you're talking into the 5th round or your rookie drafts or whatever.
Another
Just
guy
draft.
like that, and not many people are going to know him. I know you're going to know Corey Sutton from App State.
Yeah, yep, yep.
And he's a guy that was fantastic in the kick return game, but he actually has a little bit of size. He's
Yes,
around
he does.
six
He's a
one,
big
and
dude.
he's about he might even be bigger than 6'1". I have to check it, but
No,
he's
he's
over
listed
200
six
pounds.
three. I mean, we'll see what he comes in at the
We'll see
combine,
what
but
he.
listed at
I
six
think he
three.
has legit speed. App State wasn't. I mean, nobody's going to think they're a great passing team. They're kind of a pound and ground, and getting him into the NFL with a sophisticated wide receiver coach that can maybe prep him up a little bit. I think Sutton's a guy that has the traits to get on the field in the special teams that could actually become a wide receiver, and he has the size to win on the outside and do a couple other things. He's electric, and he tore up Miami this season on a
Yeah,
kick return, and I
yeah, he
really
did.
I took notice on that. I really did. Real quick, man, because we're over an hour, and I know I'm keeping you. Let me bring up the tight ends real quick, and it's kind of I think a very weak crew. Or
Yeah, it can usually be quick anyway. The tight ends.
I mean, it really kind of is, and McBride really jumped out for me this season, even though he only had one touchdown. But
I love
after
McBride.
that,
Yeah, I love him. I love him.
there's not too many guys I see being very high draft picks and being fantasy relevant. And I don't know. I've heard this class, someone was touting this class at the Senior Bowl, like, oh man, this is one of the greatest tight end classes in the last 10, 15 years, whatever. I was like, maybe because just everybody's there at the Senior
Yeah,
Bowl, I guess. Maybe like most of
yeah,
these guys, almost the top 10, almost all of them were there.
yeah.
But like, this isn't a remarkable class. I think McBride has a ton of juice. Cole Turner, is he ever going to be physical enough to be on the interior, down on the line? I don't know, but he's a really nice pass catcher. Isaiah
Yeah.
Likely is
Cole
probably the
Turner's like
highest
a
guy.
Cole Turner's like a Mike Gesicki type.
Yeah, but I don't mean he's thin, man. He really is, but he's
Yeah.
nice on the outside. Is he ever going to be a tight end in your rotation that's going to be on the field enough? Likely he's the one guy. Maybe he can improve on some of the blocking issues that he's going to need to be able to
Yeah.
do to be in, to
He
get
needs
any
to put on
draft
at least
capital.
10 pounds, I think.
What do we
Which he
think
can
about the
do.
class as a whole, and anybody other than McBride really brighten up your day?
Yeah, not really. Yeah, I'm pretty much with you. It's not an impressive class. I really like McBride, and I've been beating the drum for McBride. Like I think I'm on year 2 now. Like he was my TE1 in early 2020, like off season, pre 2020 season. I was saying Trey McBride. I think he's, if you want to get crazy, I don't love comps because people are like, well, he's not going to be that. But I think if there's a guy who could be a Kelsey-ish guy, it's McBride. Like he does it all. He has the receiving prowess he was a complete stud. Played in, not a Power 5, but like the Mountain West is a pretty good competition out there. And his production was truly sensational. I mean, the last 2 years, like he was one of the better college tight ends, like from some metrics of all time. Not raw stats necessarily, but like some of his efficiency numbers. Absolutely phenomenal player. Really like Trey McBride, and will happily grab him because he's not going to be super popular. Jaden Whittemire is probably going to be a solid NFL player, but
Not in
maybe
fantasy.
more.
Like
Yeah,
he's going
I
to be
mean,
the
I don't,
guy. He's going to be drafted day 2. He's a
because he
big
does it all.
body.
He can block, yada yada yada. But like, he's not an explosive athlete. I
He's
likely's
like
interesting for the reasons you said. He's probably the best pass catcher, maybe pure pass catcher, like the closest to a receiver hybrid. And then Ruckert is like a store brand Jalen Wedemeyer. I mean, he's good. He's going to block. He's going to be Heath Miller type guy. Jelani Woods is interesting. He's like 6'7", 280
he's
pounds or something
huge.
ridiculous. Yeah.
I
So
mean,
I
he is,
mean, he's
he is
athletic
huge.
too. He's athletic, and he caught passes at Virginia this past year. So I would keep an eye on that. A tight end, the equation is pretty simple. You want big, you want athletic, and after that, you just dart throw, big athletic guys, and he's certainly one of those. So I think I'd highlight that name as a cheaper guy. But other than that, not a ton of excitement. Although I really like Trey McBride.
Yeah, I do too. And it was I was just gonna put my 10 out, then I was gonna put my 12 out, then 15 seemed like the right number. But Garrett Prince kind of, and I'm going through and started watching a little tape. It started to grow on me, and I had to throw him in there. And I'm not gonna lie, I need to catch maybe a little bit more tape. But he could be the one guy that kind of that just comes out of nowhere and maybe is drafted a little bit higher than you were actually thinking he was going. Like, in the day two, sometimes you get a tight end and everybody's like, who? And I think he
Yeah.
could possibly be that guy if someone takes that dart. I'm
Wow.
not I'm not saying he's going day two, but there's always somebody day two that are just like, wait, he got picked over so and so or so and so, and it's like someone liked his size or someone liked his after the catch ability, and he has a ton of that. I mean, he decent size
Yeah, dude.
and
You know what?
he has some decent tape on it.
You're kind of turning me on to this guy. Like I have to confess, I was not super familiar with Garrett Prince, but I'm looking him up now. I knew he played for UAB, but he's got good size, 6'5", 240. And I mentioned before this idea of the receiving yards per team pass attempt, and he was excellent this last year. I mean, he came in at
Oh shit!
2.4, which is like really, really, really good. So
I mean, we're
that's I'm
talking
gonna have
a
to
UAB team that
I'm gonna have
I'm
to
not
look
sure
into
who the
this guy a
quarterback
little
is.
more,
You
man.
you probably would know their quarterback. I'm not going to, but I like the running back and the tight
Right,
end. I'm
right.
catching up on him a little bit. It's just I'm doing my research. Dolchich, I mean, I think he's a really good route runner. I don't know if
I
at
think he's
UCLA.
in that mold of like your Cole Turners, your Likely,
I
your
don't think he's big enough
Dulcich.
to bang
Yeah,
down low, but
yeah.
they might not put him down low, but is he going to be on the field enough to be fantasy relevant? Like I said, this is purely on my NFL draft prospects. He's a
Hmm.
guy that I think can beat your normal linebacker in the NFL in a route. So I take notice to that. He's a really nice route runner, but he's not huge. He really isn't. And he's not going to be dynamic athletically. So he's kind of just like, man, he'll probably be a fourth round pick and be somebody's, you know, third tight end. And let's see what happens. I think likely is the most likely to maybe emerge to be, maybe a tier one guy that's not right now. Turner's
Hmm.
just not physical enough to get on the field enough at first for me to be too excited. But I mean, I think we hit
Yeah.
it hard here. Like I said, somebody called this class like a great class of tight ends, and I'm just like,
If it was at the Senior Bowl, I think you're
you know,
right. It's because all these guys were at the Senior Bowl, so they were
yeah,
all thinking
Ferguson
of.
was there. He caught a touchdown. He was nice. I mean, he blocked a lot at Wisconsin. He's going to make an NFL roster. He's not going to excite anybody on that NFL team that drafts him, and they're going to throw him down the block and catch a couple passes here and there. And unless you have
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback and the tight end ahead of you tears his ACL, you're never going to know his fucking name in fantasy
Yeah.
football. You're just
Yeah.
not going to. But it doesn't mean I'm a bad guy. I don't like.
No, I mean,
He's just
all these guys are
he's
the
just
best in
not
the world, but
exciting me.
yeah, all these guys are best in the world, but it takes the top 0.5%. So when we say a guy's bad, it just means he's not in the top 0.5%.
Right. Tight end's hard, man. And combine is huge for tight ends. I always say it's the most important position for at the combine is the tight end position because you have all these remarkable athletes and they depend so much on measurables. Let's see actually how
Yeah,
big
I
they
mean,
are.
size and
Let's
speed for
actually
tight
see
end
how
is the number
fast
one
they are.
spot. Yeah.
And usually a tight end, usually a tight end didn't play tight end in seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade. Usually they were a wide receiver that got
Yep.
bigger, or
Yep.
they were a defensive end that switched sides, or even a linebacker that you didn't have the right position. Usually they haven't been tight ends their whole entire career, or maybe they were a basketball player. We've seen
Mhm.
Antonio Gates jump over Jimmy Graham, stuff like that. So you've seen a lot of different guys come into the league various different ways. Tight end is huge at the combine, and I'm really interested to see kind of some of these guys' measurements and what they do athletically and some of the drills. Hey man, I've took you over too much today. I'm sorry. We weren't supposed to go this hard.
My wife's
Amazing
gonna be
show, man.
mad, but it's okay.
I'm so sorry. Mine's been mad. So, Alfred, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. And you'll shout yourself out one more last time, and then we'll have to do this again soon.
Yeah, good times. Thanks for having me. I love talking shop. You can find me at AlfredJF on Twitter. Always happy to chat. My DMs are always open. And then also campus2canton.com, co-founder of that website. That's number two, campus2canton.com. And you know what? We do focus a lot on college fantasy, but we have resources for Devi. We have resources that can help you out in dynasty leagues as well. So come check us out. Our metrics tools are really second to none. You can plot a guy. I mean, during this chat here, I was putting Trey McBride and Jalen Wittermeyer and Travis Kelsey all on the same graph and looking at their college production compared to each other, which is something you can't do really anywhere else. So it prepares you not only for the college side, but also even in your dynasty drafts, because you can look at these guys and say, what's the comp like? Did he have a career similar to this other guy who in the NFL I know was good, et cetera, et cetera. So
No,
come check us out.
it's remarkable. You guys are the best in the business, if you ask me. And thanks again, Alfred. And if you haven't heard of Campus to Canton, go find them, and then go find yourself a league, because I'm telling you, it hits a little different. It hits a little
We got a
different
convert
starting
right here.
lineup
I
on
love it.
Saturday.
I love it. I love you just tried it and you're in. I love it.
Seriously, man. So, Alfred, hey, man, thanks again for jumping on the show. You have a great day, and thanks for everybody out there watching. We're going to be out for the day.